Moray House Trust. Welcome this afternoon to the launch of Roopnarine's excellent book of selected essays, published by the heroic People's Street Press. And we are so pleased that we have Hannah Bannister and Jeremy Pointing. Jeremy is the founder of People's Street Press. And it's our pleasure to welcome you all here this afternoon to this launch. We always say that we meet as equals at Moray House Trust, as lovers and advocates and affirmers of culture, literature, art, and good debate in Guyana. I'm very pleased to see members of Parliament here today taking a little break from the crosstalk, the snips and cuts, etc., and joining together in conversation about what is best and brightest and truest of Guyana today. So welcome all. The best introduction to The Sky's Wild Noise, this beautiful book, is, I think, Alisa Trotz's foreword to her Uncle Rupert's book. She begins by saying, first of all, the title of her beautiful essay, and Alisa is here with us today, chose not to read, but it is a wonderful essay. I encourage all of you to also read it. I think it's something that deserves as wide acclaim and publication as Rupert's equally, of course, brilliant essays. Alisa starts her foreword, which is entitled A Stubborn Hope, by saying, this thoughtful and careful volume assembles Roopnarine's writings and talks over the years. The locations are varied, from newspaper columns to refereed journal articles, from art catalogues to book introductions, from presentations to members of the diplomatic corps to speeches to Alisa's foreword to her Uncle Rupert's book is in itself a brilliant discourse. She tackles the contemporary situation of Roopnarine's political alliance within APNU, a Partnership for National Unity, making a beautifully articulated point in looking at the lines, risk of Martin Carter's poem for Walter Rodney, and positing that one must look for the social motion of any given situation and establish relationships out of the specifics of that particular space and time. And she references C.Y. Thomas's point that consensus and coalition building are difficult and delicate matters, and one inevitably does not always enter such a process with those that one knows and trusts. What would be the point? She goes on to argue the commitment is to the process, the consistent engagement involving, quote, a leap of faith for which there are really no guarantees. But if we are to transform how politics operates, might it not be a risk worth taking? This theme of altering our norms of political conduct runs consistently across the essays, and it culminates in the reflections on Grenada and in the call for reconciliation and the affirming of values of sharing, solidarity, and togetherness, which are given profound significance in the searing words of Nadia Bishop that are quoted as she calls for forgiveness for the imploders of the Grenadian Revolution and the assassins of her own father, Maurice Bishop, so that there can be a renewed charge and space in Grenada with peace and understanding. The book ranges from Rupert's astute brilliance as an art critic, arguably the most luminous of the essays in the volume, where Trotz says his writing comes alive with hope and aspiration as he asks, what is art if not the boundlessness of imagining expressed within and against the constraints of form and matter? And onto his political and humanist musings to quote, the perversity and paradox of Guyana is that the better the elections, the deeper the racial crisis. We return finally and again, she writes, to the June 23, 1980 tribute to Walter Rodney that haunts the book, to the principle of self-emancipation, to the reminder that whatever the constraints, we are subjects of our own history. Art as work, art as practice, art as embedded in social relations through the marvel of the laboring, transforming human hand, encompassing artists such as Winston Strick and the continuing relevance of poet Martin Carter, who for Roopnarine proposed for our consideration a politics of decency rooted in the moral sense. And it frames the foreword he supplies to Joe Singh's memoirs, refusing any singularity of affiliation. And the importance of language in Richard Alsop's Dictionary of Caribbean English Usage, which is one of Rupert's own favorite essays he told me last night. Alisa laments insufficient reference and insight into Caribbean women activists, Rupert, cultural producers and artists, while recognizing his homage to Peggy Antrobus. On the art of Stanley Graves, she emphasizes the way that Roopnarine highlights Graves' attention to interdeterminacy, to portals opening, to horizons just around the corner, and to multiple dimensions, reminding us of our capacity to imagine what lies in that beyond and to dare to dream it into existence. She ends by stating that Roopnarine's essays stubbornly refuse to give up hoping for what Martin Carter, in Poems of Affinity, describes as a little freedom different from this, and looks forward to the work still to come and waiting to be done by him. Thank you, Lisa, for this superb foreword, a literary gem in its own right. Rupert, my brother, on behalf of Montreal's Trust.
Thank you. I'm glad to know it's one of your favorite pieces, Rupert, in this book. It's the last piece, actually, on page 376. So I was thinking it barely made the cut, but perhaps the editor saved the best for the last. On behalf of my generation of Queen's College, the place of his own formation and of our foundation, it is well known that in 1962, Dr. Richard Reginald Alsop became the first Guyanese to be his school's acting principal. In 1958, he had been awarded the Crane Gold Medal for the most outstanding contribution to education in British Guyana. When in 2003, the University of the West Indies honored his work and his sterling contribution to Caribbean culture and scholarship by conferring on him the honorary degree of Doctor of Letters, the university's public orator in his citation aptly described Professor Alsop as a gentle giant of a scholar and gentleman, an eloquent epitome of Caribbean cultural expression, a human computer of the language, passions, and culture of the Caribbean people. In 2004, the Barbados government awarded him that country's second highest national honor, the Companion of Honor, for his distinguished contribution to education. It has been properly recognized that Richard Alsop, whom we remember today, was a towering figure in the academic and cultural landscape of the Caribbean. Since his death, tributes have poured in from the international community of scholars, and this is as it should be. In a review of his monumental Dictionary of Caribbean English Usage, I was invited to contribute to the Kaiko Hall special in 1988. I quoted Richard's words: "If this work helps, as indeed it can, to break down insular barriers, set up bridges and link up cultural roadways through the Anglophone Caribbean for a start, it will have served ultimately its highest purpose." And since the need for bridges and cultural roadways is no less compelling within territories, it is a welcome contribution to national healing to identify the various language origins that together constitute our Guyanese English. To identify, and more to the point, to recognize their objective equality of status. Washington, Farim, Bunjal, Warishi, Kwekwe, none inferior or superior to any other, all but one brought from a distant place to take up enforced residence in these Caribbean lands. As he wrote in the preface to the dictionary, the DCEU should be an inward and spiritual operator of regional integration, even more powerful as a signal of unity than a national flag would be. Dr. Alsop is probably here. But it is not Professor Dr. Richard Reginald Alsop, the eminent linguist, lexicographer, and apostle of Caribbean oneness, I have come to speak of this afternoon. Instead, I have come to remember the Soppy of fond memory, tall as a coconut tree to a 12-year-old boy on his first frightening day of cruise, his black and red gown swirling and flapping as he strode into assembly, eyes sweeping the hall for any sign of slouching or mumbling, forbidden sins in an assembly over which a respectful hush fell. John Rupert, one of those who were later to be inspired and enriched by Soppy's work in linguistics, remembers that his respect was tinged with a measure of schoolboy fear, especially so when my mind and mouth were fumbling to formulate my excuse for coming to school late. And he was simultaneously commanding me to stand up straight in that booming, resonant, and carefully articulated voice of his. I did not have the good fortune, as some did, to have had him as my French master in the second form right from the beginning. My friend of all the years, Dickinson, with whom I shared many an escapade at Queen's, some too inglorious to recount to a gathering such as this, remembers his first lesson in French in room 3 in 1953, his first introduction to phonetics. Soppy, he recalls, wrote the word G-H-O-T-I on the blackboard, and they were asked to pronounce it. The answer was fish. G-H, the F as in cough, O, the I as in women, and T-I, the ship as in attention. My own recollections of French classes with Soppy date back from 1961. Up to that point, I had cruised through my Latin, French, and Spanish classes with relatively ease, and fancied myself as a language scholar. The 2 years I was to spend on the Soppy in Upper 6 Classical brought me to a rude awakening. If we were to avoid his exasperated "Oh, mon Dieu," we would have to strive for greater and greater perfection. He had no tolerance for sloppiness, crudeness of expression, and heaven forbid, grammatical errors. Instead, we had to hunt for le mot juste. Nothing less would do. His classes in explication de texte, an old form of new criticism that was to become all the rage in literature departments in the 60s and 70s, stood me in good stead all the way up to my doctoral studies in literature. In fact, thanks to his thoroughness and insistence on nothing less than the highest standards, I enjoyed the luxury of being able to miss my first year undergraduate classes in French grammar. Such was his transforming power that even his failures turned out to be successes in the end. Nearly 60 years ago, Soppy failed in his efforts to encourage one of his students to negotiate the difficulties of the French language. 30 years later, however, Soppy's persistence transformed this failure into a kind of success when he recruited this linguistically challenged student, another friend of mine, to become an advocate for his lexicography project. In 1978, as UNESCO's first Caribbean representative, Hugh Chumley worked the organization's corridors in Paris, mobilized initial funding, and helped in bringing the project to the attention of the Caribbean Ministers of Culture, who in turn encouraged their governments to provide financial support for his epic Dictionary of Caribbean English usage. Austere, severe, demanding, and an unrelenting perfectionist for whom intellectual rigor was a passion. That much is well known. What is perhaps less well known is the softer side that was not as well as advertised. It was a sight to behold the song, housemaster of the athletically challenged Durban House, running alongside and urging Vic for the last 50 yards of the 440 as he was on his way to earning his only standard point for the house. Another Durban House boy, Peter Hayes, has left us a record of Suppy's misplaced enthusiasm for Durban's underperforming sportsmen. He says, there were inter-house competitions of every kind, and the one that Durban consistently held top position was academia. However, when it came to sports in those days, we were next to hopeless, and as a first former, I was a permanent fixture of the football team, not because I was good, but because it was difficult to get 11 players interested in representing the house. Whenever we played in the competition, it was not a question whether we would lose, but by how many goals we would lose. The members of the house did not have faith in the team, and so the only support on the touchline would be soccer. One game against Austin House, being played in torrential rain, we were down 0-6, and from the touchline, Soppy, dressed in long boots and coat, shouted, "Come on, Dubai," not Durban. "Pull up your socks." I took him literally and bent over and pulled up my socks. Soppy yelled, "Not like that, Hayes." Then there was the epic upset when one memorable Saturday afternoon, Durban upended a star-studded Pilgrim House in a never-to-be-forgotten cricket match that provided Soppy with his greatest joy as a supporter. Durban batted first and scored 100 plus. Pilgrim went into bat and was so cocksure that their 3 stars dashed off to Bocas Sports Club to play a hockey game. To their surprise, when they returned, Durban was batting again. Gordon and George Royer had bowled up Pilgrim for 12. The match ended in a draw. Soppy promptly wrote a song which was sung repeatedly at the house Christmas party. Stories about Soppy will be handed down for generations. He was a true legend. There will no doubt be the inevitable embellishments as time goes on. Lest we forget, he's credited with having pronounced the shortest ever prayer at a house feed. Bless this food that we are anxious to eat. The last time I saw him was at his home in Barbados some years ago. We talked of many things, but mostly about Guyana and the condition of the country. He was dismayed, I put it mildly. We remember him today with affection and gratitude. On behalf of us all, I say adieu. Even my failing memory has retained the lines of the sonnet of the great Renaissance poet he taught us to love, Joachim Judaï. Heureux qui comme Ulysse a fait un beau voyage, ou comme ces tuiles qui construisent la toison, et puis il est retourné, plein du sage et raison, vivre entre ses parents le reste de son âge. It is a poem of exile, written from afar, and sings of the yearning for home and the sweet solace of the familiar. It is a good note on which to bid him
For no other reason, we need more radio stations is so that we can hear Fake back on air along with Carlton James. We'd now like to ask Karen D'Souza, who is kindly videoing this for us, to come forward and to teach the free man how to praise Rupert's tribute to Martin Carter.
Celebrating Martin 1 year later, a tribute delivered at the National Cultural Center December 1998. An online pic I'm reading from Van Stamping. I haven't seen a book yet. The unrepeatable voice won't speak again. Died yesterday and quit us. The talker with groves, and straightway it's grown quiet on the planet that bears a name so modest, Earth. I've chosen to begin with these lines of Anna Akhmatova on the death of Pasternak because of the resonance we find as we turn our thoughts to our very own talker with groves and the silence he left behind. He was only 12 when the Second World War broke out. By another 12 years, he had absorbed, as well as any, and more deeply than most, the lessons of Nazism. By the time he was an adult, he had fully absorbed the fresh, humanist lessons of the anti-fascist coalition. The spirit of this coalition expressed itself institutionally in the United Nations and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Within that broad anti-fascist coalition, Martin Carter was to find his chosen ideological location, and within that location, his own humanist niche. When Martin Carter is fully understood, it will be seen that he was an extraordinary human being of unusual talents, rich and fruitful intelligence, for intelligence can be rich but not fruitful, and an unfathomable depth of humanism. Although he did not mature in the age of cyberspace and instant communication, he was able to conduct and achieve his own self-development and mental self-emancipation right here in Guyana. He utilized fully all the means of communication then available to ordinary people. He was not alone in this search. His self-development took place at a time when scores of his age group were on a similar quest, and he was never a recluse, but engaged fully in every chance for him to change. With his absorbent roots and leaves planted in the human ecology of Guyana, Martin Carter was a thinker who maintained worldwide antennae to serve his inescapable duty of seeking the truth and proclaiming it. Martin Carter was the outstanding intellectual of the movement for maturity. This is not to pretend that he was a major political figure in the eyes of the Guyanese masses. Although his attitude was always, this is my hand for the revolution, the people who did not see him as their leader in the sense that they saw Jagan or a Burnham or an Ivan Edwards had a sense of reassurance when they saw him walking in their ranks, tall and stately, head high, brows knitted, eyes everywhere, ears attentive, ready to talk, walking there, sensing the psyche, seeking the meaning of whatever they did. He was not a mass leader, nor did being one have any meaning for him, yet his was a household name. There were poets before him, a long row of poets and versifiers. There was, just before his generation, the inimitable A.J. Seymour. But it was Martin Carter who established the link between ordinary men and women all over the country, and in every racial group and of all ages, between themselves and poetry as a Guyanese creation. It is in this sense that Martin Carter was head and shoulders above the political leaders of his time. He brought to politics a rare and cultural development that escaped many of the products of higher education in the metropoles of the world. It was a marvel to see poems of love, beauty, and freedom, which to him was both love and beauty, and penetrating editorials flowing from the same pen, each in its fitting idiom, each with its own force, each serving its own end. No wonder then that in the crackdown of the British in October 1953, when British regiments were brought in to depose the government he helped found, had supported and assisted, Carter was labelled a ringleader. That compliment so often paid by the colonial oppressors to the most vertical of subjects. One of the discomforts he must have afforded whoever was on the side opposite him in class or nation alignments or in argument was his habit of analysis. In a way, he had become a national shrine. No one spoke of him with anything but love and respect. He could close a chapter with the words, "The mouth is always muzzled by the food it eats to live." And this line could be received by the entire population with confidence and without question, and remain in the memory of the older generation until this day by merely being printed in a Sunday paper. So what is his legacy? Byron's historian, bard, philosopher combined, and statesman too, speaking at the United Nations in his mature years for a brief moment on behalf of his country. His knowledge of history was detailed and particular, and the human family was his constant focus. His thesis was how astonishing were the ways in which people everywhere have coped with the environment and struggled to transform it in accordance with the dictates of human justice and the compassion of the angels. Ending with lines amended and quoted from Auden's poem to W.B. Yeats, "Earth, receive an honored guest, Martin Carter is laid to rest. In the deserts of the heart, let the healing fountain start. In the prison of his days, teach the free man how to praise." For tonight's occasion, the launch of Rupert's book, it is fitting to read Martin's poem for Walter Rodney, written on his assassination in 1980, a line of which provides the title of this collection of essays. Assassins of conversation, they bury the voice they assassinate, in the beloved grave of the voice never to be silent. I sit in the presence of rain in the sky's wild noise, at the feet of some who, not only, but also kill the origin of rain, the ankle of the door, as fastidious as the great fight, the wife of water. Risker, risk, I intend to turn a sky of tears for you.
Thanks very much, Karen. The books are the property of Austin's Book Services, and they are on sale tonight. So my apologies to all the readers, but only today we got them. The next reading will be by Akima McPherson, one of Guyana's young, promising, and already outstanding artists, winner of one of the Guyana Visual Art Exhibition Awards of last year. And we've asked Akima to read for us Philip Moore of Guyana and the Universe. Akima. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Mandela was not the first to embrace this life-affirming principle. The luminous Mahatma Gandhi, in his teachings and practice, summoned us to the highest ideals of human behavior. All of Gandhi's campaigns of nonviolence were underpinned by a hunger for reconciliation, for the cultivation of friendship with his opponent. And, as we know, he was murdered for not hating enough. Closer home, almost 26 years ago, our Caribbean suffered its greatest trauma of modern times as the Grenadian Revolution self-destructed in a storm of violence and murder that opened the way to the invasion by the U.S. Armed Forces. A few weeks ago, the last of those responsible for the murder of Prime Minister Maurice Bishop and his colleagues were released after 26 years in prison. Their release was not uncontroversial. More than a year before their release, on New Year's Day 2008, Nadia Bishop, the daughter of Maurice Bishop, issued a remarkable call for reconciliation to the people of Grenada. Nadia Bishop's words should be etched in stone, committed to memory by the entire political class of the Caribbean, and particularly of Guyana. Pain does not justify staying in pain. I don't mean to imply that our individual stories are invalid or that we should diminish our personal experience, but we have focused on our stories of loss for so long that we must let them go if we are truly to embrace reconciliation. Let us from this day forward tell a new story about our people. Let us tell a story of forgiveness, of reconciliation, of renewed purpose, of renewed faith, of renewed hope. We are too small a nation to continue this way. We all say we want world peace. Do we see the need to speak with a cordite if we are a bishop supporter? Do we see the need to speak with a bishop supporter if we are a former detainee? I suggest that it is time that we see the need. We must reach out to each other. Let us be examples of peace in the world. If we can't find common ground with our brothers and sisters here in our own country, why do we expect peace to exist anywhere else in the world? Let each of us individually this year be the change that we want to see in the world. Mervyn Claxton, the former head of UNESCO's anti-apartheid program, reflecting on Nadia Bishop's summons to a higher humanity, has written that whether she knew it or not, Nadia's call for unconditional forgiveness and reconciliation appealed to deeply entrenched values in at least two of our ancestral cultures. Claxton made the point that traditional societies in Africa and India accorded great importance to such values, which they saw as absolutely essential for maintaining social harmony and promoting solidarity in their multicultural societies that were constructed on fundamental community values of integration, solidarity, and togetherness. If we can learn to revive these values and let them provide a foundation for that constructive social change, if we embrace the idea that the quality of our life is dependent on the quality of life of others, that the well-being of our grandchildren is directly tied to the well-being of our enemies' grandchildren, then we will have opened the space for renewal.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, Vidya. Thank you, Rupert. And to close this evening's readings from In the Sky's Wild Noise, we will ask Joe Singh, I always say Major General unretired Joe Singh, to come and read a piece from Resonances of Revolution and for a bright future for our children and grandchildren.
Thank you, Brenda. Good evening, everyone. Continuing the theme of Rupert and I have many things in common. But one I know that is his annual pilgrimage to Derry so as to interact with his grandchildren. I'm fortunate in that I see mine every day. But I know that his mission and what passages I've selected today encapsulate what I consider to be his mission, which is to create an enabling environment where our grandchildren can grow up and discover their true potential and realize their true potential. In our foreword to Dr. Roopnarine's book, The Sky's Wild Noise, Dr. Elisa Trotz writes, and I quote, "The sphere of the political is not just the property of parties and parliament. Building a new and inclusive political culture has also informed Roopnarine's work as the WPA's representative for the 1999 Constitutional Reform Commission, as a member of the first select committee on constitutional reform in 1994. In this regard, it is Article 13 of the Reformed Constitution that stands out, for it holds the capacity to potentially reinvigorate political and public life in Guyana." Elisa quotes, "The principal objective of the political system is to establish an inclusionary democracy by providing increasing opportunities for the participation of citizens and their organizations in the management and decision-making processes of the state, with particular emphasis on those areas of decision-making that directly affect their well-being." End of quote. Elisa continues in her foreword, "This theme of altering our norms of political conduct runs consistently across the essays, perhaps more explicitly in the meditation on the lessons to be learned from Guyana, Grenada, and Suriname, symbolized so tragically by the spectacular collapses and setbacks of the early 1980s. This portion before by Elisa is what influenced me to select for my reading today an extract from Rupert's presentation, the colloquium, Remembering the Future, the Legacies of Radical Politics in the Caribbean, given to the Center for Latin American and Caribbean Studies, University of Pittsburgh, on April 5th, 2009. This presentation was titled Resonances of Revolution, Grenada, Suriname, Guyana. It is in 6 sections, and I shall read the 6th section titled, And for a Bright Future for Our Children and Great-Grandchildren. Rupert writes, the perception has been for some time growing across the Caribbean that the existing state forms inherited at the independence disable the Caribbean people from overcoming the scourge of poverty and underdevelopment. Calls for constitutional reform are increasing as the weaknesses of the present system become more and more glaring, except to its gatekeepers and stakeholders. The task is to build grassroots, change-oriented organization in and out of parties on the basis of practical and strategic issues and in a spirit of non-sectarian inclusivity. The experience of Grenada has delegitimized vanguardism and instructs that it is more imperative than ever to build alliances across differences. We must learn the strength of otherness and difference, and above all, we must guard against the fatal arrogance of righteousness. We must focus on what we agree on and work persistently and with integrity on differences that are primary contradictions. The community-based organizations outside the political parties are already networking for health, literacy, child protection, environmental sanity and disaster preparedness, and against violence and rape. We must deepen the work, multiply and connect networks within and across territories. He writes that in a recent letter to me on how he saw the new possibilities, his friend and comrade of long standing, the Rodneyist historian Horace Campbell wrote, and I quote, in practical terms, the networks of networks form the kernel of the new move for revolutionary organization. These networks provide spaces for self-awareness, self-mobilization, and self-organization for the tasks at hand. Quantitatively, the more of these networks, the more possibility for the leap. Rupert continues, the progressive parties and networks have the duty to transform irresponsible personal and community behaviors, to mount and sustain vigorous modern campaigns within and across the territories of the region, reinforced by the diasporic resources and energies to reform the unaccountable and unrepresentative electoral systems, the disempowered local government systems, and the heavily centralized governmental systems. Because elections are the only road available, broad-based movements rooted in communities and traditional civil society organizations must prepare themselves to enter the electoral arena and launch a people's challenge to the old politics and its entrenched interests, armed with a radical and humane social, economic, and political reform agenda, with the dismantling of the ossified state system as the #1 priority. Only such a root and branch transformation of the state will bring our Caribbean societies closer to the ideals of free Grenada, where men and women once dreamed of a better life for the children and the great-grandchildren, confident that no challenge could not be overcome when the power to take charge of their lives rests in the hands of ordinary people. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Joe. I think it's a beautiful note on which to conclude the taste, the little journey through the page. images of the Sky's Wild Noise. And we want to now ask Jeremy Pointing to say a few words. And Jeremy, we thank you again, and Hannah Bannister and Adam Lowe, the young Adam Lowe who's writing this all online, and the heroic work of People Tree Press for this excellent tome, and for the countless other volumes of Guyanese and Caribbean literature that you provide and nourish us with year after year, volume after volume. Your good work is very gratefully acknowledged and sincerely appreciated. And I understand as well that Jeremy and People Tree Press have also been collaborating with the valiant efforts of the Caribbean Press, along with Ian MacDonald, David Devine, and the Minister Frank Anthony. And we want to also salute you for that, Jeremy. And not omitting, I don't know if Ruel is here, but not omitting Ruel Johnston's criticisms, which we also need to acknowledge and consider in the spirit of Moray House Trust, and its belief, to quote, that a culture thrives and develops where ideas circulate and are robustly debated and interrogated. On that note, Jeremy, we ask you to come and say a few words on this occasion.
First of all, just to say a big thank you to Vanda, to the Moray House Trust trustees, to Lloyd Austin. Lloyd Austin is one of the heroes of know a little about the kinds of struggles that he has to maintain what is an absolutely splendid bookshop. And, you know, it's a heart of possibility in visiting the store. What I want to do is, I'm not going to talk a great deal about the Skies of Noise, but I want to kind of celebrate it as a kind of 25th anniversary of the relationship between myself and Rupert. I knew about Rupert before. I used to read about Rupert in things like Caribbean Contact and the copies of Daydream that I used to get sent. But we began a kind of collaboration that's gone on for 25 years, and this has been one of the richest kind of collaborations of my life. We began Web of October, which was published in 1988, so 25 years ago. And, you know, right from the start, one could see here is work of the highest kind of analytical brilliance. There's an essay there on Martin Carter, which is the model for every kind of piece of academic. I mean, to call it academic writing is to belittle it, which is elegant, perceptive, and so on. And I would point to it for anybody. The dreadful kind of post-colonial jargon that gets churned out around a lot of discussions of Caribbean writing. But it was also kind of like poetry, a great sensitivity. Here is somebody who is very special. And then that was kind of enhanced and reinforced by Sweetness and Priya, a beautiful collection of love poetry that came out in 1993. And as well as a kind of sense of those two sides, there is also a kind of an intellectual narrative that's running through it. And then, you know, that first masterpiece of the thing of Primus of the Eye, which was came out in 2005, the work on Stanley Greaves. And that for me was, I'm a very word kind of centered person. I've always liked art, but I never really kind of quite got to grips with how he thought about art and so on. And what Rupert again does in that book is to show you how what you have to basically do is look, and then this again is a masterwork of teaching you how to look and bringing those kind of ideas and the way Stanley has created a Caribbean universe in his work. We collaborated around on things like the excellent introduction that it also in this volume that Rupert wrote for Shadows Move Among Them, Ed Littleholtz's splendidly kind of playful book. And it's that kind of collaboration between a writer and editor, which I think is mutually enriching. I learned a great deal. Hope was able to contribute bits and pieces to it. So The Sky's Wild Noise is a kind of, I always wrote culmination, but it's not a culmination because I have some definite demands on Rupert. He has to get himself out of listening to parliamentary debates at some point. And what he has to do, he has to write the introductions to the Martin Carter's notebooks, because there's nobody else that can write those introductions. And I also think that he really ought to do something, he ought to extend the work on Flipboard. And I remember one of the kinds of memorable things about coming to launch The Skies Were Dead, to launch Promise the Eye, was that Philip Moore, who was frail at that time, took the travel down and be present for that. So maybe perhaps a kind of a thank you for that is that you need to write something more extensive. I mean, he's Guyana's William Blake, isn't he? With that kind of, universal kind of resonance. The kind of suggesting you've got all the tools to do that. You mentioned Rupert and Stanley Greaves and Ian MacDonald and Vanda and Dale Casor, who always looks after us so brilliantly when we're in Guyana. And I can remember a kind of imperishable memories, and they're memories that connect Guyana and Leeds. I can remember lying in a hammock with Rupert and Stanley lying in hammocks. I think in Rupert they saw it was in New Garden Street. And we were lying there talking, being shown Stanley Greaves and notebooks and thinking, and being amazed by all that. And I always kind of remember a kind of an epic kind of journey that Rupert and Stanley and Deo made to Leeds. And you couldn't believe these are people who, have such savvy political and aesthetic kind of instincts. And yet they got lost, so incredibly lost. They drove round and round and round and round. And I have this other kind of memory then of having got there. But Stanley had come up to sort of do the colour proofing of his things. And these were slides that had been made years ago. They faded, pictures he'd never seen for that time. He knew exactly what colours it was. Meantime, Rupert and Dale are snoring on our tree. But so those are kind of images that keep that connection between Leeds. Maybe perhaps ought to become a kind of a suburb of Georgetown at some point. So I would say we're very, very proud to have been the midwife to such an important book. But as I say, for me, it's a kind of an opportunity, as a kind of physical sign, as a thank you for a friendship that's lasted and will keep on going as long as we're around. So thank you, Rupert.
Thanks very much, Jeremy. And I just can't resist writing Rupert's book. This is a little essay he wrote in Starbuck News, 18th of September 1994, on Literacy Day. And things are better now, but things were a bit grim then in terms of reading material. And he says, and there comes the visit of Jeremy Pointing among us, bearing his boxes of books and bursting over with his plans for the distribution of the beautifully produced People Tree Press publications throughout Guyana. He came as a breath of fresh air. Given the prevailing aridity, its effects may or may not last, but it had felt good on his skin. His plans include not only a network of commercial distribution, including the possibility of mobile bookshops. More creatively, Pointing's People Tree and Red Thread Press have also submitted a joint proposal for getting the books into the school libraries now being established in some parts of the country and for training teachers in their classroom use. People Tree has also established relations with the Dorothy Tate Foundation, you see Jocelyn, the mother of that over there, aimed at promoting community publications and actively extending the list of 9 resources. Approaches are being made to have the best of the books considered for inclusion on the CXC syllabus, and this in turn can lead to the writing and printing of study guides and workbooks. The key idea at the base of all of Pointing's proposals is to get more and more and more books, mainly of imaginative literature, into the hands of more and more people throughout Guyana. I think some of that, anyway, has been fulfilled, and you can think about the other ideas for Jeremy. So now we we'd like to ask Rupert if you would just come forward and let us see you and celebrate you. And if you wish to say a few words, Rupert Roopnarine.
Thank you very much, Anna. Friends, it's not out of shyness that I didn't want to say anything. I just felt but I will say that when I saw the first time and Gerald sent me a copy, I could not believe that they had taken these pieces of writing and turned them into a stunning book. And I want to say that you can see it here. The reproductions of the paintings in this book are of the highest quality, and really I was stung then, and I continue to be stung by the sheer beauty of it. So if you buy it, you need not even read all of it, but check it. I feel also that I just came back from the Bocas Lit Fest, which is run by the enormously energetic Nicholas Loughlin, who is really a wonder worker. We were all there, Jeremy, Hannah, Ian, and we were there among Caribbean writers, bookmakers, poets, and so on. And they had an endless stream of activity, the panel discussions and talks and so on. It was really a very life-enhancing experience. I had the energy and the time to do more of it, and I was able to do it, and I was able to do enough to get a good taste for us. And we had a reading that afternoon. It was the last afternoon here. We were in 3 prize-winning books people had to read. I actually chose some of the same pieces that you read this afternoon, a piece that was read by Joe, for instance. And I said then in my closing remarks on my thoughts on the Bocas Festival that I had actually come straight out of the budget debates, which was true. And a flood of language. Not all of it is used to heal and to reconcile, because most of it is used to divide, to deride, and all of those things. And it was completely heartening to be at the Bocas Festival, where words, in fact, great feast of words, and come to unite and to essentially energize us and nourish us. This was an extraordinary experience. And for me, the great value of Moria House and everything that happens here is that I take Moria House, remembering David and everything that happened in this house over long years, dedicated to the same ends, to understand art and culture and literature as essentially nourishing and healing activities. And this is why we pride our fellowship here at Moria that is always completely non-partisan. We are united both in the love of art, the love of culture, and the love of truth. And we need to celebrate that. So thank you all for coming this evening. Enjoy the book.
Thank you, Rupert. And we're looking forward to the next volume. In fact, one of the things we discussed was having some of his work on art, on the Stanley and Strick and the Caribbean artists, of course Philip Moore, and have them made into short PowerPoints, taking images and some of the words, and actually producing them here and having the borough students and other art students and taking them out further. I think it would be a beautiful little suite of audiovisual things that we can take forward from the book and out of the book. I just want to say that also tomorrow we're really pleased that about 25 young writers of poetry and young writers of drama are gathering right here to have the opportunity to meet with Hannah and Jeremy, hopefully Rupert, and anybody else who wishes to come. Actually, I see one of our writers right here, Doctor. You're welcome if you have the time, 11 to 3. But it's mainly for the young writers because we have catering constrictions. But it's something we started in Moray House. This will be our 4th workshop for these young writers. And in her absence, I'd like to thank Amanda St. Aubin at Scotiabank for generously giving us some facilitate the young writers to meet and to peer review their own writings between and among each other. And we've had Joyce Jonas, we've had Ian, to whom they gave a standing ovation, share their own journey as young writers and to engage with what we hope will be a new crop. And we are hoping, Jeremy, to publish some of the work that they themselves will choose with help, no doubt, from Ian, maybe Rupert yourself. And we're hoping to bring a overall out in a revived form that would feature some of our young writers' work. So thanks to all the inspiration, Rupert and all others. And Ian is going to say something to close us all off. Thank you, Ian.
I know it's such a brilliant piece of reading and Jeremy and Rupert. But I have to say, I must get up to say that Rupert has been far too modest. Which was an extraordinary 4 days of celebrating the writing. And I have to say that he and his book played a very prominent part at that festival. And he's far too modest. He was very prominent in his book. Won, amongst many outstanding entries, won the non-fiction prize there. And it's obviously an outstanding book in not only West Indian terms, but in world terms, in my opinion. And I also have to say that he mentions, quite rightly at the end, he was making some remarks, he was doing some readings, and he made these remarks about language, too often, especially in politics, dividing us. Whereas at that festival, language and writing and words unite us. And I can tell you that that got the biggest applause almost at the whole festival. Rupert, thank you very much.
I cannot help but say that on this occasion, to take up Rupert's theme of what Morehouse and several other cultural organizations in Ghana are trying to do, that I see Frank Anthony there, fresh from Cabinet, and we see David Granger, a writer of wonderful thing in his history, and I think I saw Debbie Backer earlier, and the Speaker of the House. So I think all of you elected officials, there is an opportunity to mint some new language in Parliament, and from time to time, maybe, Dr. Anthony, from time to time, have each of you read each other's poetry, and a little history from David, and a little thing from Jenny, and so on. Thank you all very, very much for coming. And as I think one of the things in the book says, the green leaves instead of the ashes, or from the ashes, the green leaves. And I think, what's it? The garden over the ashes. So I want us all to take that in our hearts and minds, and please buy a book. And Lloyd, thank you so much. I need to say, Lloyd was commended by Jeremy. Jeremy and Hannah went with me to Austin's bookstore today. It really is a wonderful shop. It is overflowing with all kinds of books. Again, the classics were there, and as Jeremy walked in, the entire front range of the shop was full of about 15 copies of beautiful people tree books with beautiful covers. And so I think it did Hannah and Jeremy's heart well to see the beautiful display of people tree, and then a stone's throw away with beautiful display of Caribbean classics and some of the newer books. So it's a wonderful place. Lloyd went to England. Lloyd Austin bought 56 books, I think 4 or 6 cartons of 14 books in a box each, and he shipped them by air freight himself, so they would be with us here today, and they are on time and with us. So thank you, Lloyd. And we will never do it again. We here at Morehouse, Joan and I, when we put the price of $3,000, which is false, because the price is $4,000, as Lloyd pointed out. You got to add in the air freight and the this and the that and so on, but it is still a deal, because the book sells for nearly £28, 20, whatever it is. The book actually sells, if you're about to take a trip to London, the book sells for, I think it's £27.99. And then multiply that by $350 and so on. So we were given, thanks to Hannah, a fantastic discount, between 60 to 70% of the book off, so we can have a Diana price, so that some of us at least can buy it. And in our next shipment, we are going to be making donations to the library and the other, the other places that we do give books to. For today, please buy the books from Austin's Book Center, now set up in Morey House for the next hour only at the special price. So thank you very much. And please enjoy. We'd like to